Every jar in the pasta sauce aisle sells the same fantasy. Sun, tradition, somebody's grandmother stirring a pot on an Italian hillside. Most of those jars barely contain real tomatoes, and some still charge $10 for the privilege. Peel back the marketing and a different picture emerges. Modified starches, added sugar, soybean oil, and a phrase, natural flavor, that sounds specific, but legally covers almost nothing at all. Today we're going through 5 jars worth kicking out of your cart, starting with the single worst offender, a sauce that's dominated the American market for 4 decades on ingredients whose only job is mimicking what real tomatoes should provide, and working down from there. Then we'll show you 5 brands where real tomatoes actually do the work. Every claim here comes straight off the label. Let's dig in. Number 5. Prego Traditional, the default you never actually decided on. Prego hit shelves in 1981 and has held prime shelf space in nearly every American grocery store for more than 40 years. That staying power isn't earned through excellence. It happens because a product quietly becomes the default, and defaults are notoriously hard to dislodge. Nobody actively chooses Prego. You reach for it, the way you reach for anything occupying the same familiar corner of your routine for decades. Over that time, Prego perfected one skill: tasting inoffensive enough that you never feel motivated to switch. That's not a compliment. It's a business strategy. The flavor is engineered to register as tomato sauce without triggering a reaction strong enough to send you shopping elsewhere. Not bad, not particularly good. The broadest average interpretation of the category. Acidic enough to pass, sweet enough to avoid sharpness, smooth enough to never surprise anyone. Built to generate the fewest complaints, not the greatest satisfaction. Sweetness hits first, and it's not the sweetness of a properly grown tomato. It's added sugar, near the top of the ingredient list. In pasta sauce, sugar isn't a seasoning choice, it's a correction, an admission that tomatoes aren't naturally sweet enough on their own. Here's the number that reframes the jar. A half-cup serving, roughly 4 tablespoons, packs 650 milligrams of sodium, 28% of a day's recommended intake, and a realistic serving is closer to a full cup. Scale that accordingly, and think about how often this jar gets opened in a household using it regularly. Tomato puree leads the ingredient list, fine on its own. Puree is just tomatoes and water. But a few ingredients further, you hit modified food, starch, sugar, and natural flavor. Modified starch gives the sauce a body the tomato base alone wouldn't have. Natural flavor exists because the tomatoes weren't generating enough flavor to convincingly represent what they're supposed to be. These aren't minor additions, they're structurally essential. Remove them, and there's no product left that can sell at this volume. Prego occupies shelf space nationwide because it became the automatic pick before most shoppers had reason to question it. The business model hinges on that 12 minutes to dinner moment. Familiar label, cart already moving, one more jar going in because it's what got bought last time. Multiply that across 4 decades and hundreds of millions of households, and you get a business that never needed to compete on quality because it already won on habit. If this jar sat in your family's pantry growing up, bought without a second thought, remaining the default in your own cart, without you ever consciously choosing it, that's worth pausing on. Nobody selected this sauce after weighing it against competitors. It became the option nobody got around to comparing. The moment you flip the jar and read the fine print, that 40-year story looks nothing like the one on the front. It's America's best-selling pasta sauce, and that fact reveals more about how grocery shopping works than about how the sauce tastes. That's the worst of the 5. From here, every remaining brand still has its own way of cutting corners. starting with one built on a phrase almost as tired as traditional itself. Number 4. Ragu Old World Style Traditional. Decades of trust, built on very little. Old World Style Traditional ranks among the most ambitious copywriting on this list. It suggests craftsmanship, patience, a family recipe preserved through the leap to industrial scale. Look at what's actually in the jar, though. Tomato puree, water, soybean oil, salt, sugar, dehydrated onions, citric acid, spice, natural flavor. That soybean oil is the giveaway. Oil has no business in pasta sauce. This formula's tomato-to-water ratio isn't enough to feel like genuine sauce. So rather than sourcing tomatoes that could stand on their own, the recipe adds oil to fake a richness it doesn't have. What you're eating is essentially oil-emulsified tomato water, seasoned to taste vaguely Italian. The flavor confirms it. An aggressive burst of something tomato-adjacent for 3 seconds. Then it disappears. No development, just salt and a fading memory of sauce. The texture swings between thin and oddly thick, not from natural variation but from competing thickeners. 600 milligrams of sodium per half cup, added sugar on the label, dehydrated onions instead of fresh. A cost-cutting choice, not a flavor one. $2 to $3 a jar, which sounds like value until you realize the value lies entirely on the label. Ragu's survival rests on price and shelf presence. Everywhere, usually cheapest. Betting shoppers won't wonder why a sauce this long an ingredient list still barely tastes like anything. Next up is a brand that sells the jar itself harder than what's actually inside it. Number 3. Classico Tomato and Basil. You're really just paying for the jar. Classico runs $5 to $7 and comes in glass, and that glass does more of the selling than anything inside it. The name implies something classic and considered. The polished label sells the feeling of a deliberate dinner choice, without requiring you to read what's in the bottle. Classico built this for the shopper chasing that feeling. The packaging closes the sale. The contents never have to. Crack it open, and the texture is uniformly smooth, almost featureless. No visible tomato chunks, no natural variation. Nothing suggesting a vegetable was ever involved. It's engineered into a uniformity that only happens when consistency at scale matters more than flavor. The basil is present the way a scented candle is present, technically detectable, doing nothing for the actual experience. Here's the ingredient that tells the real story. Citric acid, right beside natural flavor. Tomatoes are naturally acidic. Needing added citric acid means the tomatoes here weren't acidic enough on their own, and that missing acidity had to be manufactured back in. That's a sourcing shortcoming, wearing an ingredient choice costume. Natural flavor is the industry's blanket excuse, representing almost any blend of compounds companies don't have to specify. In a sauce whose whole point is tasting like tomatoes, needing natural flavor admits the tomatoes alone couldn't do the job. 450 milligrams of sodium per half cup. $5 to $7 a jar. For anyone choosing Classico because it feels like the mature option. Glass instead of plastic. A cleaner label. A higher price reading as quality. This is where that signal falls apart. The jar does feel nicer in hand. None of that changes what's dissolved into the sauce. The glass did the persuading. The contents never had to. 3 down. 2 left on the avoid list, and then 5 genuinely worth your money, including 1 pick that might completely change how you shop this aisle going forward. Number 2. Hunt's traditional pasta sauce. Cheap, and it doesn't pretend otherwise. Hunt's sells for under $2 and tastes like it. Unlike nearly everything else here, it isn't dressing itself up as more. No painted village, no invented family history, no premium posturing, just a straightforward budget jar, which would be fine if the contents held up their end. The flavor sits in the vicinity of tomato sauce, acidic, savory, faintly sweet, without landing on any of it. Flat is the word. It tastes like sauce described from memory and manufactured from the description. The texture is where it breaks down. It refuses to cling to pasta. Toss a bowl, and within 30 seconds the sauce has slid to the bottom, leaving bare noodles. A sauce that won't stick to noodles has failed its one job. To Hunt's credit, its ingredient list is genuinely shorter than most. Tomatoes, tomato puree, salt, sugar, spices. No modified starch, no added oil, no emulsifiers. A lighter additive load than sauces charging triple. That makes Hunt's the most upfront product on this list. What you taste is close to exactly what's in the jar, without anything artificially propping up body it was never going to have. That said, sugar's still on the list, and sugar in tomato sauce always signals the same thing. The tomatoes weren't sweet enough on their own. Spices tells you nothing specific. At roughly 550 milligrams of sodium per half cup, that climbs fast at a realistic portion. Hunt's is the most honest disappointment here. It isn't pretending to be something it's not. It's just not worth cooking with, when better options cost only a little more. Last on the avoid list is the brand that spent the most money convincing you it's the exception to everything above. Number 1. Bertolli tomato and basil. Dressed up to look imported. Bertolli has staked its entire reputation on one word: Italian. The name, the typeface, the confident label, and above everything, olive oil, prominently featured. It's presented less like an ingredient and more like a promise, crafted the way it would be in Italy by people who care. Flip the jar around, and it's manufactured domestically, right here in the US. Nothing imported. That olive oil doing the heavy lifting on the front label shows up in such a tiny quantity, it barely registers. What you're tasting isn't olive oil. It's a sauce that merely lists olive oil as an ingredient. 2 different claims, and the label blurs the line. Within the first 8 ingredients sits modified cornstarch, the entire reason this sauce has any thickness. Real body should come from patiently reducing quality tomatoes. Here, a starch additive does that job instantly, leaving a chalky coating no amount of advertised olive oil can disguise. The sweetness is another giveaway, rounder and blander than a properly ripened tomato produces naturally. It's a thin tomato base propped up with sugar to feel finished, the way a weak soup gets doctored with sweetener instead of being simmered properly. No real acidity balancing it, no savory foundation, just a flat, syrupy wall of flavor start to finish. If you've reached past cheaper sauces toward Bertolli because the packaging promised something refined, this is where that promise collapses. You paid for imagery of olive groves and family tradition and got thickened tomato water with a sugar problem. At $5 or $6, that's a real premium for a starch-thickened, over-sweetened sauce in an Italian disguise. The label does all the work the contents can't. That's the last of the 5 worth putting back on the shelf. Now that you know what to leave behind, here's what deserves a spot in your cart instead. These next 5 brands faced identical ingredient options, identical cost pressures, and identical shelf competition, and arrived at completely different conclusions. Those differences show up on the label first, and on your plate immediately afterward. Third best pick: Muir Glen Organic Tomato Basil. Proof the $5 range doesn't require compromise. Muir Glen sources its tomatoes from California's Sacramento Valley. That's essentially the whole story. No borrowed Italian folklore, no invented grandmother. Just tomatoes traceable to one named location, grown organically, with no chemical intervention needed to taste like something they're not. Texture stands out immediately. Real tomato pieces, genuine chunks, natural inconsistency instead of forced uniformity. It handles like something built from real ingredients. A modest bar, until you realize how rarely the avoid list clears it. The basil tastes woven into the sauce rather than sprinkled on as an afterthought, the way basil tastes when it's genuinely part of the recipe. Ingredients: organic tomatoes, organic tomato puree, organic extra virgin olive oil, organic onion, sea salt, organic garlic, organic basil, organic black pepper. Citric acid, 9 total, everyone recognizable as food except the citric acid, doing legitimate preservation work rather than compensating for missing flavor. The key difference from Classico's formula: 310 milligrams of sodium per half cup, the lowest figure of anything on the avoid list and fully competitive with everything in the recommended section. $5 to $7, exactly the same price bracket occupied by Classico and Bertolli. Identical price, radically different contents, an entirely different philosophy behind the ingredient list. If you've been reaching for Classico, or Bertolli specifically, because that price range felt like the natural step-up tier, Muir Glen proves the price was never actually the issue. The formula was. This gap has nothing to do with packaging. It comes down entirely to what actually went into the jar. What comes next takes this same honest approach and pushes it even further. Second best pick, Rao's homemade marinara, the jar that redefined what a jarred sauce could actually be. Rao's gets talked about constantly, and for once, the reputation matches reality. This isn't a brand built on marketing or distribution. It earned its following because people opened a jar, tasted it, and couldn't explain why it tasted so unlike everything nearby. What's printed on the back answers that question. This sauce tastes cooked, not assembled. Real evidence of actual decisions made while it simmered. The texture is loose and irregular, olive oil pooling on the surface, tomato pieces of varying sizes, visible herb flecks. Nothing forces uniformity because nothing was designed to. Real sauce made in a real kitchen never looks machine-pressed, and Rao's doesn't either. The flavor actually has an arc to it, more than any other single factor. That's what separates this from everything on the avoid list. Most jarred sauces deliver one loud, sweet note up front before vanishing entirely. Rao's builds across the palate instead, a genuine beginning, middle, and finish worth savoring, because the base ingredient carries the entire experience without additives doing any structural heavy lifting underneath. Ingredients: Italian plum tomatoes, olive oil, onions, salt, garlic, basil, black pepper, oregano. 8 total ingredients. No sugar, no starch, no citric acid, no natural flavor, no soybean oil, nothing modified anywhere. For a shelf-stable jar sitting at room temperature, that ingredient list is genuinely remarkable, and it's achievable purely because of the tomatoes involved. Rao's relies on San Marzano-style Italian plum tomatoes, naturally lower in water content and higher in natural sugar than standard commercial varieties. Naturally sweet enough that no added sugar is required. Naturally acidic enough that no citric acid is needed. Deep enough in genuine flavor that no natural flavor needs to be invented. When the core ingredient is this good, the entire additive list becomes structurally unnecessary, which is essentially the whole argument of this video, proven on a single label. $8 a jar, a genuinely significant sum for pasta sauce, and plenty of shoppers hesitate right there, especially standing beside a $2 ragu that appears, at a glance, to solve the exact same problem. It doesn't. If you've ever tasted Rao's once at a friend's place or in a restaurant and wondered afterward why every other jar suddenly tasted watered down, this ingredient list answers that question directly. What you're actually paying for is quality tomatoes and a refusal to cut corners around them. The next and final pick takes this same underlying principle even further and asks a bit more effort from you in the kitchen. Best pick overall: Cento San Marzano organic crushed tomatoes. the winner that barely does anything at all. Here's what puts Cento's San Marzano organic crushed tomatoes above everything else covered in this video. It isn't a finished sauce, and it doesn't pretend to be one, which is exactly why it earns the top spot. These are crushed San Marzano tomatoes, grown specifically in Italy's Agro-Sarnese-Nocerino region, a distinct stretch of volcanic soil at the foot of Vesuvius, where the local mineral content, drainage, and microclimate together produce a tomato naturally sweeter, less acidic, and more complex in flavor than nearly anything grown commercially anywhere else on Earth. That's not marketing copy. It's the documented agricultural reason San Marzano tomatoes have remained the professional standard in serious Italian kitchens and restaurants for generations. Crack open the can, and the difference is visible before you've even tasted anything. The liquid runs clear and bright red, nothing like the murky, muddy color you get from tomatoes that have been overprocessed or diluted. The flesh stays intact, seeds still visible. It genuinely looks like a tomato that was simply harvested, crushed, and canned, because that's essentially the entire process it went through. If you've spent years eating jarred sauce, the flavor here needs a beat to register as normal. No added sugar softening it, no citric acid sharpening it artificially, no natural flavor filling in gaps. What you're tasting is simply an outstanding tomato, because that's the entirety of what this product is aiming for. Natural sweetness, clean acidity, and real savory depth, all coming directly from the fruit itself. Complete ingredient list: organic San Marzano, whole peeled tomatoes, organic tomato juice, sea salt. 3 ingredients total. The basil variety adds a 4th. That's the entire list, nothing more. No starch, no sugar, no citric acid, no natural flavor. No oil pretending to add richness the tomatoes never needed. Nothing in that can that doesn't belong there. $5 for a 28-ounce can. Around 260 milligrams of sodium per half cup, the single lowest figure anywhere across this entire video, either list included. And one final detail nothing else on this list can claim: DOP certification. Denominazione di origine protetta. Not a marketing slogan, but an actual legal designation the Italian government enforces, which means outside auditors have to confirm these specific tomatoes genuinely originate from that exact region and meet documented production standards. Fail to maintain those standards, and the certification simply gets revoked. No other product in this lineup can claim that same kind of outside accountability. The honest trade-off here: this isn't a pour and serve product. You'll need to finish it yourself. Garlic and oil in a pan, crushed tomatoes added in, roughly 20 minutes of simmering, seasoning adjusted as it reduces. That's genuinely more effort than simply twisting a lid off a jar, and a completely valid reason for anyone rushed on a weeknight to grab Rouse or Muir Glen instead. There's nothing wrong with wanting a finished product after a long day. But for that extra 20 minutes of effort, what you end up with is a sauce you controlled entirely from start to finish. Built from a 3-ingredient foundation, grown in arguably the best possible place on Earth for this particular tomato, with a label short enough to read aloud in 10 seconds and legal backing behind every claim on it. Cento wins, not because it does the work for you. It wins precisely because it hands you the finest possible raw material and then simply steps out of the way. Here's what this comes down to. The pasta sauce aisle is designed around one goal: stopping you from reading the back before it lands in your cart. Every color, every evocative word like homemade or traditional or old world exists to build enough front label confidence that you never check the ingredient panel. That feeling is the actual product, and it's worked for decades across an enormous volume of purchases. Bertolli, Hunt's, Classico, Ragu, and Prego don't dominate shelf space because they make superior sauce. They're there because they arrived first, stayed familiar, and shoppers rarely see how far the front-of-pack story drifts from what's actually delivered. Familiarity wins at checkout, and none of these 5 has any incentive to reformulate a product already selling at this scale. Changing the recipe costs money. Staying the same costs nothing, as long as shoppers keep reaching for the familiar label. Muir Glen, Rouse, and Cento aren't doing anything remotely complicated or hard to replicate. They're simply using better tomatoes and skipping everything else that exists purely to compensate for tomatoes that weren't good enough to begin with. Shorter ingredient lists here don't indicate corners being cut. They indicate there's genuinely less that needs fixing in the first place. When the core ingredient is doing its job properly, you don't need starch faking body, sugar faking sweetness, oil faking richness, or natural flavor faking depth. The tomato alone handles all of it, and everything else on the label becomes completely unnecessary the moment the tomato itself is actually good. None of this means you're obligated to buy the priciest option available every single time. Simply switching from the avoid list over to Muir Glen at the exact same price point you're already paying for Classico or Bertolli is a meaningful upgrade at zero extra cost. The bigger leap to Rouse or Cento exists for anyone willing to spend a bit more or put in a little extra kitchen effort. Either move gets you entirely out of the category this video has been warning you about. 1. Simple habit worth carrying into every future grocery trip. Flip the jar before it goes anywhere near your cart. Not the front label, not the calorie count, the actual ingredient list. Sugar appearing among the first 5 ingredients is a signal on its own. The tomatoes simply weren't sweet enough by themselves. The word modified showing up anywhere means an industrial process is compensating for a tomato that never should have needed compensating for in the first place. And natural flavor appearing in a product whose entire purpose is tasting like tomatoes means the tomatoes needed outside help, and the company simply chose not to disclose what kind or why it was necessary. You don't need a food science degree for any of this. You just need to actually read the list of things someone decided to put in a jar and sell you as dinner. The brands that actually deserve a spot in your cart have nothing on their panel they're hoping shoppers skip past. The list you should be avoiding at checkout, that red flag checklist, is now yours. If one of these avoid list jars happens to be sitting in your kitchen right now, you've got 3 specific, distinct replacements ready to try, spanning different price points and different levels of kitchen effort. So there's really no excuse left to keep shopping blind. Drop a comment letting us know what you're switching away from and what you're switching to. Genuinely curious what people out there are actually reaching for.